The regulator, and this is why we'll be seeing millions come into the country from Pfizer.
Now, the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine can now be distributed in South Africa. The South African Health Products Regulatory Authority has approved the Section 21 application for the vaccine. South Africa has already ordered 20 million doses. For more on this, I'm joined by Dr. Boitumelo Semete-Mokokotlela from SAHPRA. Dr. Semete-Mokokotlela, thank you very much for your time here on ENCA. Now, we know that SAHPRA basically approves any medication that can be distributed and sold in our country. In terms of COVID-19, we have 200 vaccine candidates around the world. How many has SAHPRA approved, and how many are still currently under review?
Sure. So, in terms of the approval, you're correct. We've just provided the Section 21 authorization for the Pfizer vaccine. And also, we've got the 3B implementation study of the J&J. And, we had authorized the AstraZeneca vaccine based on the data that we had initially around that vaccine. So as we sit, we are at a very advanced stage of the review of the J&J vaccine for emergency use, authorization. We also are currently reviewing the Sputnik vaccine. This is the one from Russia. And we've received an application from Sinovac. So I think we do have, of the major ones that have been authorized in other countries, we do have those submitted to the countries, and some at a very advanced stage of evaluation.
In terms of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and it being a clinical trial and not the actual vaccine rollout, we know that government says that what they've learned from it is all the administration hiccups that they've experienced that will help them, of course, when they roll out for real. But medically, what have we learned from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine?
Yeah, so, it's a vaccine that, we did have data for it against the variant that's prevalent in the country, the 501YV2 variant. And as I've said, we are at a very advanced stage of the application for authorization. What we have learned, from the report that they've provided us, is that from a safety perspective, we're not seeing anything particularly unique in South Africa that has not been seen in other countries. So it typically is, I would say, a generally safe vaccine. We have reports of about 2 individuals that had adverse effects, but there's still studies ongoing to see if that's correlated to the actual vaccine or not. But on average, we've seen the usual effects of any typical vaccine. And so we're quite comforted by that, and we'll continue also to monitor the Pfizer vaccine when it is indeed now rolled out.
Now, a lot of people have been asking why we would actually put our frontline workers at risk for a clinical trial, something that has not really, that is not really part of the rollout that government was planning, and 1 million frontline workers that it was planning to have inoculated by the end of this month. So, of course, you as a doctor and in the medical fraternity, can you explain to us why it was the healthcare workers that had to take this clinical trial?
Yeah. So, and this is not like any other, clinical trial that's still at a very early stage. Remember, you've got phase 1, where you look at the safety, primarily the safety of the vaccine. Then you've got a phase 2, where you look at safety and efficacy in a much smaller number, in hundreds. And then phase 3, where you look at efficacy primarily. You still monitor safety, but primarily efficacy in larger numbers. So for the J&J vaccine, we already had data for their phase 3A study. And a phase 3B study we've put in place so that we can get, much larger numbers. And so this, from a regulatory perspective, we were quite happy with the phase 3A data that they had provided us. Also, if you remember, at the time that the study was authorized is when we had the AstraZeneca vaccine, that based on the data that we received at the time, we were then not able to, the country was not able to authorize this and, enable it to be rolled out, in essence, because of that data that we received at the time. And so, this was a mechanism, to make the vaccine available. I must say that, based on the data that we had received, and that's why, as a regulator, we could approve this 3B study because it's quite advanced. We're not foreseeing, and we didn't see, any adverse effects. This is one vaccine that, from a data perspective, they do have data against this variant. Whereas with the other vaccines, either it came and it showed that they've got reduced efficacy, whereas with this vaccine, we then were certain, even though that it was reduced, but it was still within an acceptable range. So we're quite comfortable, with it being implemented as an implementation study within this cohort. So we do not foresee any risks.
Now, we have 200 vaccine candidates across the world. Among these, just for knowledge, among these, are there any candidates that are locally a South African-produced vaccine, besides Johnson & Johnson, of course?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's, with the Johnson & Johnson, the arrangement that they have with Aspen is that Aspen will do the fill and finish. All of these vaccines that are currently, in various stages of authorization or enrollment are all developed outside of South Africa. But I do know that under the Department of Science and Innovation, there are discussions taking place around, ensuring that we've got local capability to ensure that we can manufacture these vaccines. You may have seen the report, I think it was yesterday, of the partnership that BioVac, will be having with Immunity Bio around future, vaccine manufacturing. So we do have a vaccine manufacturing company in the country, BioVac. They're in negotiations with many others, but there is a realization that as a country, we do need to invest in our own capability to manufacture and develop such vaccines in future.
All right, Doc, besides a clinical trial, what else does SAHPRA do before approving a vaccine to come into the country?
Sure. So, our mandate at SAHPRA is quite broad. We authorize medicines. We also authorize medical devices and IVDs. So you may have seen us early in the pandemic around the PCR tests, as well as around the in vitro diagnostic tests. And so, the whole area of medical devices and IVDs is an area we play a role in, PPE being one of them. And then there's the area of vaccines. So, within the spectrum of health product authorization, we play a role there. And the key things that we do as a regulator is to ensure that any product that's available in the country, it has at least met the regulatory requirements of safety, quality, and efficacy. So, in response to COVID, the team has been extremely busy because every single product had to go through a regulatory requirement, process, particularly where it does need SAHPRA authorization.
And of course, those processes are very important, and it means that SAHPRA plays a huge role in ensuring that we reach that 67% efficacy that government wants us to reach by the end of this year. But of course, we are a bit late in terms of getting to 1 million by the end of this month, and possibly late as well to get to that push date to the middle of April, aren't we?
Yeah, and I must say, the variant and the data that we received around the variant really threw a curveball, for us as a country. If you look, we had authorized the AstraZeneca vaccine around the 22nd of January or so. We had it in the country. We were ready to, the country was ready to implement the rollout. And then we were sitting with this data, and we had to make a decision on what do we then do. But I do think that there's efforts that are being put in place, certainly by us as a regulator, to expedite the review and authorization of these vaccines. And I'm certain also that government equally is working extremely hard to ensure that we do accelerate our vaccination plans.
What's happening, Doc, with the AstraZeneca vaccine? Did we send it back? What's happening in that front?
Yeah. The government has indicated, their plans with the AU around that, and I can't speak with, authority on that, so I'll refer you there to the Department of Health. But from our perspective as a regulator is that we, are busy evaluating a very detailed report of the data that they did unpack around the 501YV2 variant, and based on that, we will then communicate, with the company. So we do need to, finalize that matter of reviewing that data. But government has spoken about their plans with the AU.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. That is, of course, Dr. Buitum.